My name is Lysandra Messer Ramirez, and I'm presenting the Chapter 10 Keeping Them Playing from the Video Game Design book. What is the key part of a video game that makes you want to keep playing? It might have started off with a good tutorial, but it's actually the rewards that keep you hooked. The main objectives of the chapter were to understand and develop rewards in order to keep the player engaged, incorporating motivation into the game, and to use tutorials to keep players on board. An example I have here is Crash Bandicoot. It's Crash is going to collect a crate, which will enable him to jump higher. Um, we are already preconditioned as children to express happiness through positive reinforcement. With each reward comes a small dose of dopamine, which becomes harder and harder to experience as we age. There's multiple different ways that games reward players, from loot drops to puzzle solving. It's all based on the player's personality. Rewarding the player, the major key to what makes a game engaging. The book mentioned games like Bayonetta for its quick reaction times, Portal and Portal 2 for its mentally challenging puzzles, and Bioshock for allowing the discovery of lore along each accomplishment. Each one is a reward, however, it applies to a variety of play styles. Here are some examples of rewards in video games. So the first example is RuneScape. This design comes as a UI menu pop-up with inventory items from 3 different categories, such as experience, charms, and other, which would be more like monster drops. And the second example is Candy Crush. Um, this design is a simple animation that correlates to the rewards one, so it can vary, allowing a predetermined amount of rewards to enter the player's menu. So in Candy Crush, there is a maximum amount of rewards that has already been implemented into the game, and you can earn a variety of those, whether it be randomized or within the goal. Um, When it comes to designing a reward, the designer has to keep in mind that too many rewards can be unmotivating and in turn lead the player to drop the game. One way to combat this phenomenon is to input the idea of grinding. The book uses World of Warcraft as an example where one has to continuously fight enemies in order to gain enough rewards and experience to level up and further your progression. The Skinner box. A quick explanation is that it is a psychological study on how rewards affect the human experience. The experiment was devised by Burrhus F. Skinner in the 1930s in order to see if conditioning could be applied to rational human beings, as it was done to Pavlov's dog. He created a box and placed a pigeon inside with a button, leaving it with the choice to push it or not to push it. When the button was pushed, the pigeon received a treat. This differs from Pavlov's experiment because the pigeon is actively making the decision. Skinner called this operant conditioning, which worked just as well on humans. Here are the 4 main types of rewards. There's a variation of these in any good game. So, success and glory, ex- uh, mostly explaining it with high scores, achievements, trophies, and even mastering aspects of the game. Provisions, which is like extra lives, health packs, mana replenishing, and building materials. Access, which is unlocking levels, Easter eggs, or side quests, even extra content within the game after the game's completion. And progression, which is experience points that induce progress for the player's skills, each level bringing a new aspect of the game out. So there are multiple different ways to merge, manipulate, and use each reward system. Each one is not a complete fit for a player. That's where it can make a game more engaging for a player or frustrating for another. However, when a player finally completes the challenges to reach the reward, it motivates them to continue on to the next, since the sense of accomplishment from the first challenge encourages them to continue. Here are some examples that include um, either reward system. So this is a game that I played a lot when I was younger and kind of still do. Toontown, this game uses a sense of success to help motivate players into progressing games further and further into the game. So the player engages in battles frequently, and each battle gives you a reward, which will move you on to different chapters of the game. The second example that I have is Shovel Knight. This game uses a combination of provisions and glory to motivate the player, giving them health packs, and difficult boss battles to provide a sense of accomplishment. Um, Intrinsic and extrinsic rewards. This is further breaking down the previous four reward systems. Rewards are an extremely large part of player motivation. So intrinsic rewards are rewards within the game, examples being new levels, new challenges, or new story arcs. Extrinsic rewards occur outside of the game, for example, slot machines at casinos, friendships and bonds formed over voice chats within game. It could even go as far as trophies and accolades from video game competitions or achievements and high scores, and even bragging rights amongst those same friends. Motivation by design. We have fixed ratio rewards and interval rewards. The actual important factor is anticipating the reward. A fixed ratio is when rewards occur at specific times, such as loot drops, when an enemy is defeated, or collecting an extra life based on how many coins you've collected. Interval rewards is when rewards occur in a seemingly random formation. It could be time based or it could be in multiplayer situations. The loot normally varies more often and could give a player a sense of feeling lucky due to the drops they might receive. Examples of those being in Red Dead Redemption 2, a fixed ratio could be applied here because there's scripted moments where the player takes breaks from combat to loot in specific villages or cabins. And another example is Player Unknown's Battlegrounds, also known as PUBG. Interval rewards could be applied here since it is a multiplayer game and loot isn't always guaranteed. Tutorials and rewards. Um, it introduces players to mechanics, it establishes story, mood, and environment, and it could also make or break your game. Nobody likes being spoken to condescendingly, and not everyone likes to have things done for them. This train of thought can be applied when creating a tutorial for a video game. There are a number of different platforms from social media, console, or PC. Each game has its own tutorial format. These tutorials guide the player and teach controls while they're interacting with the system. This format has evolved from the common game manual because developers realized that players aren't reading all that much. So, what's the next big thing? An interactive manual in game. More often than not, there is an on screen visual element or NPC characters to guide the player through using positive reinforcement tactics. The goal is to hopefully hook them into playing the rest of the game by putting their mindset in a win state. Here are the two win state mindsets. How do I play this game? Could lead into a simple action, could lead into positive reinforcement, which reaches a win state. How do I get past this? Could lead you to a repeated action, which then gives you a positive reward and puts you in a win state. A win state is like an accomplishment that the player made, allowing them access to progress further. An example being a checkpoint or completion of a puzzle. There is a technique known as glowing choice, which is like an on screen prompt or a hint to help guide the player when the system senses hesitation or confusion. Everything is meant to assist the player into reaching their next win state. These glowing choices have the advantage of enabling a feeling of choice within the player, whether they choose to use the hint or not. It's all a matter of play style. Onboarding. So some methods in an onboarding include tutorial rooms, contextual, and relevant contextual. The definition of onboarding is simply to make sure the player is on board with your game. So whereas the tutorial focuses on environment and basic mechanics, onboarding is a subtle set of tools that attempts to engage the player in a positive experience, making them feel confident as they traverse your game. The tutorial room method is when a player has already gained some base level knowledge of your game and then is given the opportunity to practice or learn the combat without penalty. Of course, there are multiple different play styles, so there's options to skip this event at the risk of learning much slower. A contextual method is when a player is learning the mechanics as the action unfolds. It's basically one long tutorial spread out through gameplay. And the last one, relevant contextual method, is a subset of the contextual method. However, the difference being that the information is placed within the environment of the game itself, allowing the player to fully realize themselves inside the space. The method is very useful for developers that value player focus and immersion. The most important rule, however, is to never make the player feel stupid or make the process too hard. Remembering this is critical when considering player engagement. My onboarding example being uh, from the book. They used the game Sleeping Dogs, where there was a dojo level where you could practice all of the combos and moves that were presented to you earlier in the game. It used a training room method to allow a safe area for players to learn and practice skills that will be useful later on. My interview in the chapter was about Kenneth Young. So he is the head of audio at Media Molecule. He's a Scottish freelance audio director, composer, sound designer, and writer. He's best known for his award winning work on the audio experiences on Little Big Planet. He also won a GMA, which stands for Games Media Awards. The games that are featured on this slide are Astrobot, which is the little bot next to his face, Tethered, which is off and to the right corner, and Tearaway, which is the bottommost picture. Um, so audio is important to a game, and setting tone, which drives the immersion in a game. Think about where the player is receiving its dopamine. So this could be an example when you're using a coin and you collect a coin. Do you receive the dopamine from the coin being in your inventory, or do you receive the dopamine from the jingle sound that plays as you collect the coin? The question asked to Mr. Young was, how do you approach scoring audio when so much of it is driven by player interaction? He said that as audio designers, they must learn to work within the rules and take advantage of the limitation that the game provides. The best example is with music. It has the ability to inform and influence what the player is feeling. He uses this to provide a wider and more dynamic experience and create communication between the game and the player. He was also asked what he feels are the most overlooked aspects of audio and game development. He replies by essentially saying that the biggest challenge within development is fighting against ignorance. So many common misunderstandings and assumptions are when people have no understanding or experience of sound and music beyond personal consumption. It's one of the it's the root of a wide variety of issues within the process. I also learned that within the interview that as an audio developer, they have to refine their skill as much, if not even more, than the video game creator, since they are in control of the environment and mood, not just mechanics and skills. Um, Thank you for listening to my presentation.